Hey everyone, it's John Vibes. I have a special interview episode here with my friend Dan, who has been with us in the community for a long time and is also a mod. Me and him have been talking a lot about what's going on in Los Angeles right now because he is a resident there. And I recently accidentally waded into some political conversations on Twitter about this because I saw a few ads and a few interviews with this guy, Spencer Pratt, who wants to just take out the homeless population. And I guess he's a reality TV star, but some people in the conspiracy movement seem to really love him and they jumped all over my ass. I started talking to you about him and it seems like my intuitions were quite correct. Before we talk about that, I want to allow you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about this situation in general and your take on it.
I'm Dan Duarte. I'm Daniel Valle Duarte on YouTube. I will start from what made me care about politics was I joined the National Guard in 2000 after high school, and I ended up as the International Guard in 2004 in Baghdad for 1 year. And then that made me start paying attention to what the fuck was going on. I watched Fahrenheit 9/11 while I was in Baghdad. So I was like, oh, fuck, this seems like we got screwed over. And I didn't know who Donald Rumsfeld. I thought Rumsfeld was like a military guy. I didn't know he was like a CEO who just made poison things legal. And he's the guy that famously said, you don't go to the war with the army that you want. You go to the war with the army that you have. He gave us, so we had bulletproof vests. We got plates that were not stopping bullets. And they just let us out there with plates, by the way, that we actually had to turn in halfway through because people were just, and they also, because we had plates, the new way of teaching us how to fight was like going straight at the enemy. You're just going to fucking take it on the chest. I don't know about your fate, but famous for Dumb and Dumber. What if they shot me in the face? Yeah. Anyways, that kind of dumb shit was going on when I was in the Army, National Guard. I was a mailman in Baghdad. So I was basically Santa Claus. I volunteered for that and I got lucky by volunteering. Came back home, tried to go into college many times. I've spent 12 years probably in college. I have no degrees. I have an AA, but
that's an accomplishment.
12 years. I have 2 degrees and a bartending certificate. So that's nice.
Okay.
Yeah. I can make a nutty squirrel if you're into 1960s cream drinks. Yeah. Sorry. And then so back to LA. Eventually I ended up in LA after doing stand-up comedy. I was a mailman. I was a construction worker. I've been a professional cook, just all the YMCA characters, and ended up back in LA doing a Food Network show for Giada De Laurentiis. It was very nice. And then while I was there, I ended up losing my housing with no money because they hadn't paid me yet from the show, and then had to go to a homeless shelter in Echo Park, which is a nice area, but it was still working on itself at that point, 12 years ago. And it was a homeless place for vets. It was called Harm Reduction, where they would not drug test us, which was good and bad because a lot of people had supreme addictions on street drugs, which I think you and I both agree that there's drugs and then there's really bad drugs that are destroying, I would say, creating permanent harm to the body more than some are. I used to be, and I want everyone to be openly using drugs until I moved to MacArthur Park. And I was like, everyone's on a cocktail of street meth and fentanyl just to balance themselves out. And it's really disturbing to live around and to see. I was homeless for 18 months. I was in the shelter for 8 months of it. So the other year, basically 10 months, I was in a car, couches, whatever I could scrape up from doing odd jobs or my film jobs I was still trying to hold on to. And I learned a lot from that homeless shelter in that a lot of us were waiting to get Section 8 for veterans called VASH in California. I'm not sure if they have in other states it's called that, but you wait a long time for it. It was like an 8-month process to even get that. And then you basically have a voucher for a very cheap rent based on your income. Unfortunately, at the time, there was no one taking it. I went to probably 30 to 40 different landlords trying to get someone to take my voucher. No one would take it except for this one lady who was a slumlord. I had roaches. I had a lot of roaches. I was trying to also, I like to do psychedelics, and taking psychedelics in a place full of roaches, you're like, there's bugs on me. Oh, there's a real bugs.
A bad trip.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, oh, those are real roaches. But anyways, I learned a lot about tenant law because I got so screwed over in that deal. I probably could have taken her to court, but I just wanted out. I ended up this great place I have now. I had to get rid of my voucher because I wouldn't take it at the time, even though it was the same exact rent for what my voucher was for. But it was still worth having now I have a 1,300 square foot loft in MacArthur Park, which is for $1,900 a month, which is really good rent for LA.
Yeah,
with two parking spots, which I had no before. I was getting towed. I've been towed 30 times in LA. I'm not joking. And that's at least 250 to 700 times every time I've been towed. I don't want to pay any taxes to this fucking state anymore. They've ADHD taxed me to death, basically. Never trying to get towed. I was never trying, let's just see if I can park in this red part. Yeah, I was never trying to. I just have ADHD. Or also sometimes you would wake up and your car's just gone and they just taken it. They put a temporary sign there with a wire band that says no parking that day. And you've been parked there for 3 days. I have no idea. Anyways, funnel LA. So I live in MacArthur Park now. They've been recent operations. As you've probably seen online, ICE last May. And then now the operation Free MacArthur Park to take the drugs out of here a little bit. They took 19 kilos out from 3 spots. I knew exactly where they were getting it. I live here, so I've seen where all the drugs have been sold at. But I guess my point to that is that the police have let that go on for almost a decade since I've been here. They've allowed it. And when I've seen more dead bodies here than I ever did in Iraq. And when I've tried to respond from overdoses, yeah. And being hit, people get hit by cars randomly because they're just zombieing across the middle of the street and people here drive terribly. I'm surprised there's actually not more of those accidents. And then random, when ICE came, what they did is created fear from most people here it's the Guatemalan area. We'll say Central American, but I would say 80% Central American, probably 60% Guatemalan specifically. Many of them undocumented. They've gone through a lot to get here. They've waited in deserts for months to be here and just try to survive and do things to help themselves. And there's, like any poor community, there's people getting drunk on the streets and stuff like that, but it's not representative of most of the people here that are just trying to. Honestly, this is the only place in LA that I've seen so many kids around, which is wild that they let the drug problem get so bad because there's just kids walking around all day long seeing this and witnessing the trauma that is people not having a good time and dying on the street.
I feel like there's this attitude now, like with this Spencer Pratt campaign and the way that homelessness has been pushed to the front, it's like they think that they're going to solve the problem by just, I'm not sure, going through and throwing away people's shit and locking them up or busing them to another city or whatever they're planning without addressing the underlying systemic problems of why this homeless population is there in the first place. And that's kind of why I really don't trust somebody who's talking about solving homelessness unless they are talking about those underlying things. And I think everybody just says you're a commie or you're a socialist or something like that. And I don't even really identify as either, even though I agree with the goals. And we shouldn't have a society where people are living on the street and shit and people are trillionaires. It's insane.
It's insane. And there is a lot of what you're talking about. Like people have been, this is not a new problem in LA. You can, if anyone has lived here for over a year, you can know that it gets cold maybe I use my heater maybe 3 weeks the entire year. I have my windows open all year round. It also doesn't get that hot really either. I use my AC maybe 2 weeks a year tops. You can survive on the street if you can here because you can simply not die while you're sleeping, like in many cities, right? Like when I was living in Seattle, I did the Census Bureau one year, 2011. And my job specifically was to go into the green belts, a lot of green belts. Like green belts are like tree areas between cities and stuff. And I had to go inside with a flashlight with a group of 10 and try to count the homeless in green belts, which is super dangerous and scary for $11 an hour. Terrible idea. But they were campers there. You still have to have the wherewithal to survive in that environment or you'll probably just die or pass away. People that are here on the streets can ultimately just bumble around, scavenge and pass out every single night and not die of the weather.
Yeah, and like somebody in Denver would or whatever, right?
They probably won't freeze to death here as long as they can find some cardboard, which is aplenty. And there's in MacArthur Park, especially in the park, we have churches every single day. There's churches, like multiple churches, and there's also multiple feeding homeless food pickups a day, probably 5 or 6. So people that can survive on the street would obviously want to be around people that are taking care of them. And they want to demonize, I feel like sometimes like we shouldn't be feeding them. It's not us. We're just trying to do the right thing here. If we stop feeding them, they're going to get more desperate and start breaking into cars. You actually will see very little break-ins here. A lot of pyro stuff, a lot of things getting set on fire, but people really don't biff things around here too much.
I saw this one thing yesterday about how a new multi-million-dollar apartment complex or something that was just being built got burned down entirely because of a homeless guy that was trying to worm himself there or something.
But owners of buildings will also leave them open. So the owner of my building, I learned this week actually, owned the building next to me that was lit on fire completely. It was a 3-story brick building built in 1927, same as this building. And I was trying to call them to let them know that it needed to be closed in the back. It was filling full of trash and someone's going to let it on fire. My next message was hey, it's on fire. I was actually on the news holding all my pets because the building next to me had caught on fire. What I'm saying is that people will let pyros set buildings on fire just to avoid the cost of demolition as well here. So that's also an interesting thing. I'm not saying that's the entirety of it, but that's what I noticed.
That brings to like another important point that I wanted to discuss is this situation where there is massive corruption among the politicians and the developers, and the homeless people get scapegoated for it. Because I see so many people like, we put so many billions of dollars into this homeless program and nothing happened, and there's still more homeless people. And it's, that's not their fault.
I'm not sure what's happening. I do appreciate you brought up the James Lee thing, that the fact that he did bring up the fact that there's a lot of fraud going on the 501c level. Tons of fraud going on. Billions, Absolutely. Probably billions, right? And Karen Bass is allowing that to happen. She's obviously she's from the National Endowment of Democracy. She's a CIA plant, basically. The CIA is obviously works for the corporation, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, she's here to make sure that things don't get better. She showed up during that ICE raid just to be like, oh, stop this. I'm like, but you're right.
It seems like there is that I think the money is being spent in the wrong places and it being spent to continue the situation essentially instead of figuring out issues with the city's infrastructure that's causing the problem, or getting people into housing and jobs, or these constant barriers that are in the shelters and things like that. I think that there are a lot of things stacked against people, and changing the system, I think, would require sacrifices in certain ways to the people that run the system. And also, when they have just a viable cash cow that they could keep on milking money from, they don't want to change things. I think there should be more holistic solutions that also incorporate mental health, drug treatment, stuff like that, because otherwise they're just continuing the problem.
And because I'll repeat it again, the fact that you're saying homeless are being used as a scapegoat, they are allowing buildings, rather than being like, it's an insurance problem too, because they can get insurance on destroyed property, they will just simply let the back door open and let the homeless take care of the rest of it. And then you have a bunch of burnt out buildings when those could have been saved and used as housing. There's tons of green spaces that are just blank, empty yards that have just been green. I've been driving by them for 10, 15 years almost now, over the course of me living here twice. And any of these spaces could be used for community, anything, honestly, other than what they're being used. There's a parking problem where everyone's getting their cars towed and stuff. And I drive around here and there's just empty parking lots that are just chained off for no one to use, that are owned by the city. I really don't know. I looked in a couple, some owned by the city, some are private, but they're just not allowing people to park in these. I'm sure people would gladly pay $100 a month to park in a place that was locked up rather than trying to hunt for a place on the street, especially when you have 80 parking spots that are visible anyways. It seems like there's a massive miscarriage of resources here. They spent $57 million on the park to make it look just the way it was, which is ugly, and not do anything other than, they dug it all up, looked nice for maybe 2 months, and then everything just fell apart. And when you go to Echo Park, where all the white people live, it didn't used to be that way. It used to be very Latino. But once all the white people moved in, it became very nice. They had all of a sudden they had ecologists down there and making sure there was like a full ecosystem. Whereas ours, there's a lot of the animals that used to live here when we first moved in, ducks, turtles, they're all dead now. They just let them die.
Wow.
And it feels cruel. They do things to us, MacArthur Park, because, in my opinion, because it's a Latino, mostly non-English speaking area. There was a shooting in front of the metro here, which is a crazy metro, but whatever. When I first moved here, the whole place, so imagine the metro's back here. There was a whole giant padded lawn, basically, for 30 to 40 vendors to be there selling lots of cool things. It was beautiful. It was great. There was and then somebody shot somebody one day, and then they chain link fenced all of that, so you can't use any of that. They kicked all the vendors out. And they, not only that, here's the sidewalk. They took this much of it and put a 12-foot fence between you and the street, all the way the length of the entire street. So I've been chased down by gang members in the street. It's between the fence area. You can't get out. And it was designed so the cops could run down perpetrators. But what it's being used for is for gang members to run down whoever they fucking want to, or the cops do nothing. And also that whole part that's been chain linked off is just collecting trash. If you drove by at 3 a.m., people are just fucking face down, ass up in the cement. And it looks like a fucking dog kennel built in hell. It looks insane. And there's that alone, the visual of it, that used to be a thriving, beautiful vendor area, looks like Children of Men, but everyone's on drugs. And that is a form of cruelty that no one deserves, let alone the fact that they're doing it specifically here to people that don't speak English. They would not do this in Westwood or Brentwood, we'll say, as the Western side.
Yeah. And I don't think that more cops or more money for cops or just,
I've watched them watch people get beat the fuck out of them, let the perps go. And then they step in, they go, whoop. And it's really bizarre to watch such. I don't want to be cynical, and not all cops are like that. But you see enough. Sorry, go ahead. I'm getting a little bit.
No,
Pounding my desk.
You're right. You're right. And I don't think that just throwing people's tents in the trash every other week is helping anything either. And the attitude that I see from a lot of people that sucks and is upsetting is just these people made bad decisions. They couldn't keep their shit together or whatever, and this is on them. This is their fault, and this is not, society plays no role in this or is not to blame at all, and that's just their own personal failing. And I don't even know how some people could say that. I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there who might have just been in privileged positions for their entire lives and just are that blind.
My parents' boomer class does not like people. They don't like people. It's my dad. I remember I was visiting my dad in Washington State, and we were driving in Seattle on some interchange, and there was like a black man that was his age on the corner of a very dangerous area to even be at. It was like on the freeway somewhere out on an elbow. And my dad was just like, he was like, why doesn't he just join the army in a serious manner? And I was like, he did not used to be that way either. He raised me to be very leftist, honestly. I wouldn't say as left as I am, but he was very much a Carlin type of person who was in the military for 16 years, understood the bullshit. He would have talked me out of. My parents didn't know I joined the military. I did it secretly because I didn't want anyone to talk me out of it. And they honestly would have talked me out of it. They weren't pro-war people, but they definitely have a very broken bootstraps, liberal conservative brain on a lot of things. And
yeah, I mean, I could have been a veteran. He could have been in the army previously too.
Yeah, I literally was like, Dad, I was in the army. I was homeless. And he says, oh. And he just moved on. He had no more words. I was like, all right. But if that's his reaction after all these years, I don't know. We all don't have access to therapy the way we should. One lucky thing about having the VA is I've had therapy for 15, 20 years. And I say that's probably the most important thing that's helped me to get beyond my trauma, to stop being such an asshole to other people or try to understand them.
Yeah, I think that is super important because we live in this crazy ass world where we're in so many situations that the human brain isn't made for. And also we're in an increasingly isolated world where even if we do have friends or people to talk to or family members, we don't necessarily want to unload all vent on them constantly. And also I think you are able to think through your shit a little bit better when you're talking to somebody who is neutral and is usually able to give you a fairly neutral response. They don't judge anything or make a judgment usually, but they'll be able to ask you questions to dig deeper into your own kind of situation, which I think helps a lot. And normal people, I don't think, are trained to do that. And I think it is a very specific trained skill set there where people know this is how I help this person dig deeper into what's bothering them.
Yeah, I remember the first time my sister and I were like hanging out as young adults and realized that our parents were actually younger than us mentally on the psychological level. Oh, we're actually older than our parents because they literally have everyone's in therapy because my mom refuses to go, that kind of stuff. Basically, kind of. She's much better. Menopause is great.
That's a classic situation.
But I remember the day I stopped being mad at my parents for allowing me to join the military because they wouldn't help me figure out college money. And that was very freeing. I definitely held it on them that it was their fault that I joined the military because I didn't know how to pay for college that they wanted me to go to. So I had created this whole pathway for why it was their fault that I had such a bad experience in life early on. And if they would have stopped it, if they could have stopped it, they would have. But I didn't have the wavelength or the tools to understand it. Was just like sometimes shit just goes on, and there's no good being mad at people.
Yeah, I think that is an important element of it and plays a role in the solutions to a lot of the problems that we were talking about before. When I hear people talking about cleaning up the homeless problem and not addressing things like mental health, drug treatment, housing, it's just not serious. And with everything, more criminalization and more punishment is not what we should be doing.
Especially when you have people making money off of all these things, which is really the scariest part, is there is a robust incentive for people to take all of these things that could help people out possibly and bend them to be perpetually unuseful to the people. I don't know how would you, if you lived in my area, like you've seen all that I've seen, just like trying to help people as much as you can. Eventually you just have to step back and just live your own life a little bit. But like, I guess it'd be interesting to know what other people think about, like, what are their real solutions to like, what's happening? Okay, you get rid of some of the drug dealers. There's always going to be a vacuum created. there's always going to be some pipeline of that drug coming to people where they need it. So do you take these people out? So I had a lot of people I lived through the late 90s, early 2000s, where there was a very bad meth addiction problem in the Washington state, across the US, and opiates. But mostly my friends were into meth. Smart people love meth. But they had to get away from the city itself and all of their friends and just move to a different city where they didn't know anybody after rehab. And that helped them to be completely away from everything that was available to them. But not everybody has that option. Not everybody's from the suburbs that has families that are able to help them out a little bit. A lot of people have nothing. They have nobody. From people I've spoken to, people have gotten here. They came here trying to find work or whatever because their state didn't have any. And addiction's a bitch. Once you're addicted to something, it's really hard to, even though you can mentally understand what you need to do, that need and that want has been created as a chemical in your response.
Especially when you're in a shitty situation and you want to kind of sedate yourself from it.
Yeah. How many times have you had a bad day and you're like, I could use a fucking whiskey shot? And to them, that's crank. And thank God it's not us that want crank. And a lot of us maybe have gotten off of whatever that is. I definitely was drinking really cheap alcohol for a long time. And I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore. I'm drinking a mid-shelf tequila at least now. But we all have like things that we have a hard time getting rid of, or as far as addictions go. And it's not something you can't fault everyone for trying to balance themselves with
Exactly. And the thing is, rich people can have these addictions constantly, and they don't even go to jail for shit half the time. You got Elon Musk, who can take drugs to China and be rolling his balls off in a country where you can't even smoke weed right next to the president. So it's like, if you're rich, you can freaking do anything. But if you're poor, you can't screw up at all. It's a twisted reality that we live in, and I think there's so much propaganda that we ingest about that just brainwashes us to blame the victims of society in so many cases, and it's a way that protects the existing society the way it is.
It is really interesting the way you can be hyper-normalized to the sheer amount of pain that exists on the streets of LA. Just all of a sudden become that girl was at 1999 killing himself. Dave Chappelle, about calling the home people just grouch. Get over a grouch. Get a job grouch as you step over them. And that's what they are. Like, they're just almost like some sort of Muppet, as part of your scenery as you walk around. Once you stop noticing, because when you do notice, it's deeply painful to really empathize with everyone like me. I remember so many people here that they probably are dead now. Some people hopefully got help. I think some of them were like, definitely they were in the mood for help and they got help. They let it get really bad. So I moved in this apartment in 2018, and then 2020 COVID, and then 2021 is when it got just real bad here. And I remember talking to this lady. I called her Cinderella because she had somehow collected a bunch of cages for hamsters and things, and a bunch of street rats that were her pets, but also street rats would come roll through them. And I called her Cinderella because she had all these rats.
That's funny. My friend has pet rats.
She was nice. Anyways, people like that, I really admire the fact that people like that exist for so long on the street and don't break. They're still such a nice person every single day. And that lets you know the people don't want to be suffering. They don't want all these, but again, like you're saying, there's all these rules foisted on you sometimes where you can't do all these things. People would often choose, okay, I get a free apartment, but I can't use any drugs. So some people, that's impossible.
Or even you got to get rid of your animal too. That's another rough one for people.
They tried getting me to get my apartment, get rid of 3 of my animals. And I got 4 during COVID, and they're like, you have to get rid of 3 of them. And luckily they passed a law in LA saying that if you got any animals during COVID, you're not allowed to do that.
Oh, wow.
Because that was becoming a problem.
But yeah, I think that it's definitely going to be something interesting to see like how this develops, because like I said, you don't often see homelessness be at the forefront of an election debate. And it seems like everybody hates the incumbent. A lot of people hate Spencer Pratt. And then there's a couple of people who are kind of seeming to be fighting over the leftist spot. There is the one that was on Hassan's last night, and then there's Ray, who I think Michael Burns has been posting about.
I think I was showing you, this is my sample ballot, and look, I'm on our page. Anyways, there's just 51 governor options, except for Butch Ware, as we talked about.
And that was the Green Party candidate that they kicked off, right?
Yeah, who was the VP candidate under Jill Stein, who I voted for last. I don't really promote parties ever. I like specific people. I do Butch Ware. I do not vote Democrat unless I have to, and Republican, sorry. Try again, always, never? I don't know.
Yeah.
But 51 options. options is a lot for anyone to even figure out. Like, how do you, who's going to,
That's wild. And I guess California, everybody's going for that shit. And there's probably a lot of people who have the money to run too.
So Nitya Raman, by the way, was for mayor, not governor, but she city council, I believe, before. She is DSA. I've liked a lot of what she's done over the years here in LA. I think she's been very productive in her own way. I will probably end up voting for her for mayor. Spencer Pratt, is it mayor? Is he running for governor or mayor now? I forget. Mayor, who is, everyone forgets, he was on the roast of Trump, Donald Trump. Remember that? He was one of the guests on the roast of Donald Trump like 15 years ago.
I feel like this was my first time hearing about him. He seemed familiar, but I was like, I'm not sure I know who he is or where he's from.
From the Hills was my girlfriend at the time, loved that show. I watched way too much reality TV against my will, but I did know he is based on that. Not a cool guy. He got some steam because he lived in the Palisades and his house was burnt down completely. So he was rightfully very angry and made a whole very big crusade out of the last couple, only 1 year now? I can't remember now. It feels like forever. Yeah. And he was famously like exposing the fraud that was like the Fire Fest, whatever. It was our Fire Fest, honestly. But a lot of the money went to Zionist places and he himself is a Zionist. So really he's just probably controlled off from the inside. I don't believe that he was doing this whole thing as a long con, but maybe is he popular right now? I really don't even know.
He seems to be popular among a certain contingent and he's paying a lot of people to promote him. And he's got a lot of bots run it. So it's hard to say how genuine the support that I see for him is online because there are a lot of bots and there is a lot of payments happening. Like I was telling you off camera, it was very anti any political parties until all this Trump shit happened. And it made me really start to think that I do kind of understand voting in self-defense. And also my hopes of there being a revolution anytime soon are kind of cut. So I'm now a little bit more pragmatic about certain solutions that it's like, all right, if we're in this situation that we're in where the billionaires have been doing what they've been doing for the past couple of years and we're seeing this struggling that we're seeing. And then we also see people like Zoran who could get into local politics and actually move the needle to help somebody. It seems foolish of me to ignore that realm entirely.
Although Raman is very much a Zoran of LA, I would say. If Nitya Raman was in, she would be our Zoran. She just doesn't have the riz.
Yeah,
I would say. Very well liked amongst the comedian community that I know. I moved here originally amongst stand-up comedians, so a lot of them most comedians are pretty. Amongst the comedians I grew up was around, we're all very progressive, if not leftist. Some are fucking liberal, whatever, but very few conservatives. The conservatives are mostly libertarians. They're not pro-war, but Nitya Raman has been, as far as I know, people I've talked to her, she's really cool. And seemingly wants the good, is not corrupt like many people are, not coming from some sort of very corrupt business background or some sort of, I have all these college accolades, being part of all these. I don't think groups are a good thing, honestly. I think if you're listing all these groups that you're a part of, it's actually probably, in my mind, baggage that you're now attached yourself to.
Yeah. That's a lot of times people that are steering their point of view.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also hard to tell sometimes when people only get a year or two to do something, you have to wait for that turnaround to happen. The turnaround happens a couple of years later from the things that they've done, right? There's not always an instant response. So it's hard to even know if someone's doing well when you have so many constant elections for things sometimes, especially with 2 years for congressman. Again, like you, I was not into voting really either, other than I would pay attention for ballot initiatives. Honestly, I would, and everything else I would like. And I think a lot of what the corporations, the fascists want, what do you want to call them, is for us to check out and not pay attention and not participate. And it does feel like we're not having any sort of impact, but if you don't participate, we have zero impact at all, and they can control all of that. So that is the game they play with us, and I don't like it either. I don't want to read these things. I hate it. It's written for,
and I don't think that it should be like the be all end all of activism and solutions and stuff like that, but it also should not be an arena that we cut ourselves out of.
I have a mutual aid next to me, and I started posting random lives when I go to the mutual aid and pick up, just to people know what you can get for $45 I can get $203 worth of groceries, because one group of people in my area, luckily a block away from me, decided to get together, rent a space that they spend way too much money on every month, and gather food from all around the community, from farmers markets. Mutual aid, by the way, is a place where a community can come gather to buy things for a cheaper price that were donated to them. So they spend the time picking up free things, and we give them a donation price, which is usually 1/4 to 1/10 of grocery prices to eat. And that alone has impacted this community in such a positive way because everything around us, we're in a food desert without that. The mom and pops were shut out of their businesses for the most part because of rent hikes, or 99-cent store disappeared. That was like the closest place to shop at. 99-cent store is not a good place to shop at if that's your only place to shop at. But mutual aid, again, I guess I'm saying you can make a difference in things like that. Get together with 10 people, gather items for a community, donate them to the rest of the community at a cheaper rate, and you've made an impact.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of, I think there's a lot of ways that people can contribute. And it's not just a political thing, but it can definitely help. And this is kind of like a point that I made earlier this week with this situation that happened in North or South Dakota. I can't remember, with the Peshlaw site with the Lakota tribe, where they won. And it was a matter of, there was a legal battle that was happening. There were people who were going through the court system, the establishment way and stuff like that. But then you also had people on the front lines who literally took over the site and occupied the site. And I think that without both of them things working together, I think the chances of it being successful were much lower.
We live in a class war, basically. And what you're saying is people on the ground in a protest doing the protest stuff, people doing everyone has a role to play in this war that we have, right? Not everyone has to be a protester. Not everybody has to be an influencer, but everyone can fit into a certain job if we can figure out how to get along and be working along. The last time I ever went out in the crowd was when ICE came to MacArthur Park. And that's when I realized they were all wearing the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, and they were all just pointing their guns at people with no fucking muzzle awareness. And I was like, nope, I'm out of here. And then one of the guys told me he'd fuck me up. I was next to the Univision journalists, and we were just sitting on the curb, just standing there. And this little fucking tiny guy from the back of this whited out Brinks truck or something with ICE gear on, it was like, you get off that curb, I'm gonna fuck you up. And I'm wearing my veteran's hat at the time too, like a very obvious veteran. It has medals on it, so they know I'm a fucking veteran with medals and shit. Not that I'm a fucking great soldier, but we all get medals.
Yeah.
And I noticed wearing that, they specifically targeted me. And I was like, okay, if they're allowed to do that openly, then it's a whole different game I'm playing here. They obviously have zero respect for anybody. They think that they're in charge of whatever they're being in charge of, because they hire dumb guys. I was in the military with a lot of, dumb guys. My least favorite time of life was being around, people think everyone should have a gun. Oh, have you walked around everyone that just has a gun? It's super not fun, especially when you know those guys are fucking not all right in the head.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm not against guns, but I don't want to live in the fucking Wild West. And we did also have to realize that we're not alone, and we can work together with each other.
That's probably a good place to leave it, though.
Yeah, good talking. Yeah, it's great, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. We should do it more often, for sure.
I'd love to. Yeah, I'll watch every night, and I'll be on Mod if you guys want to talk to me. Want to see my cat videos, you can come to my channel. Daniel Valle Duarte.